Good evening! That was Joey Newcomb singing his song, Lag BaOmer. How's everybody doing? It's Thursday. Almost Shabbos. Feels good. Let's light up the darkness. Who's with us as we get it going on a Thursday evening? Yehuda in South Carolina, John in Sedona, Stephen in New Hampshire, Melissa in New York, Tom says shalom, Sharon in New Jersey, James in Indianapolis, Nancy in North Carolina, Heather in Kansas, Patrice in Utah, Pauline in Arkansas, Bella in Florida, Paul in the Great Northwest, Carolyn in Raleigh, Hannah in New York, Christo in Lubbock, Alan in Maryland, Bill in Mid-Missouri, Paula, yesterday's class was fantastic. Hope we can keep it going. Alicio in Rosemead, California. Renee in Indiana. Paula's in Chicago. Lucy in Minnesota. Over on the YouTube side, Gwen in Michigan. Aoife in Florida. Welcome, everybody. Today's class is sponsored by Jeff and Rabbi Sherry Hirsch, saying kol hakavod to you both for the amazing work that you are doing. Thank you so much, Jeff and Sherry. May you and all your family and all your loved ones be showered in blessings. And we say amen. Thank you for enabling us to share more Torah with more people by sponsoring today's show. If you'd like to sponsor a show, this is such a good time. It's the annual campaign. Nina will put the link in the comments. All donations doubled. Help us build the AT app. All right. I'm getting faster at doing the preliminaries so we can get to the meat. It's a meaty tractate. We are on Daf Daled, page 4, here in Tractate Megillah, the 11th volume of the Talmud, the Laws of Purim. We pick it up right at the very bottom of the B-side of page 3. And Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, and now we're at the top of page 4, the cities Lod and Ono and Gei HaCharashim are cities that have been surrounded by walls since the days of Joshua, Yehoshua, the son of Nun. Remember that we read the Megillah everywhere around the world on the 14th of the Hebrew month of Adar. That's when we celebrate Purim, except ancient large cities that were already walled cities at the time that the children of Israel entered the land of Israel led by Joshua. In those ancient walled cities, which bear some similarity to Shushan, the capital of the Persian Empire, where the events of Purim took place in the book of Esther, in those cities, so they read the Megillah on the 15th of Adar, and Jerusalem is one of them. And so here we're hearing, right, according to Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, that also Lod, which is one of the most ancient cities in the land of Israel, as well as Ono and Gei HaCharashim, were those kinds of cities, ancient and had walls already at the time of Joshua. And the Gemara asks, did Joshua ben Nun really build these cities? Didn't El-Pa'al build them at a later date, as it is written, 1 Chronicles 8:12? And the sons of El-Pa'al, Eber, Misham, and Shemed, who built Ono and Lod with its hamlets. And the Gemara counters, well, according to your reasoning that this verse proves that these cities were built later, you can also say that Asa, the king of Judea, built them, as it is written, 2 Chronicles 14:5, and he, Asa, built fortified cities in Judea. Therefore, it is apparent that these cities were built more than once. How could that happen? They were built, they were destroyed, they were rebuilt. Rabbi Elazar said these cities were surrounded by a wall since the days of Joshua, Yehoshua ben Nun, and they were destroyed in the days of the concubine of Gibeah. So that was that incident where the tribe of Benjamin ended up, against all the rest of Israel, very unseemly incident involving a man and a concubine, etc. We don't have to go into those details now. But we read that right on Tu B'Av, which we celebrate on the 15th of the month of Av, one of the fortuitous events is that the tribe of Benjamin was sort of allowed back into the greater community of Israel. And that the sons of the rest of Israel could marry the daughters of Benjamin and vice versa. That took a generation, right, until all the people that had been, living in Benjamin during that unseemly episode died off, right, and only their children will be allowed to marry into the rest of the congregation after that. So this is being referred to here, right? So Rabbi Lazar said these cities were surrounded by a wall since the days of Joshua, son of Nun, and they were destroyed in the days of the concubine of Gibeah as they stood in the tribal territory of Benjamin. And in that war, all of the cities of Benjamin were destroyed. See Judges chapters 19 through 21. So El-Pa'al then came and built them again. They then fell in the wars of Judea and Israel, right? The northern kingdom of Israel versus the southern kingdom of Judea. And Asa came and restored them. And the Gemara comments, the language of the verse is also precise according to this explanation, as it is written with regard to Asa. And he said to Judah, let us build these cities, which proves by inference that they had already been cities at the outset and that he did not build new cities. And the Gemara concludes, indeed, learn from this that it is so. New subject. And Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi also said, women are obligated in the reading of the Megillah. Why might we think that women are not obligated in the reading and really the hearing of the Megillah? Somebody has to read it so that others can hear it, but the obligation is to hear the Megillah. Why might we think that women are not obligated? Because women are not obligated in time-bound positive commandments. They have other responsibilities in the home. And so women don't have to put on tefillin in the mornings, and women don't have to pray 3 times a day. And there's many other positive mitzvahs, meaning thou shalt, something you must do, as opposed to a negative commandment, thou shalt not. So a positive commandment that must be done at a particular time, generally speaking, women are exempt from it. Reading or hearing the Megillah on the day of Purim, that's a time-bound positive commandment. Women are obligated, right? So the usual exemption of women does not apply here. Why? Says Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, because women too were significant partners in the miracle. Obviously, women were very involved in the miracle. It was Esther, who arranged matters in the palace with Achashverosh so that the wicked Haman would be defeated and be executed, whereas he who tried to execute all the Jewish people failed, and the Jewish people ended up doing very well out of that event. So certainly she was involved in the leadership, but that's really not what is meant here. That's one interpretation, what it means that women were involved too, that they too were part of the miracle. But the other view is the idea that, well, it was a death sentence, right? Haman had arranged that all the Jews in the universe, all the Jews in the world were going to be killed on the same day. It was a budding Hitler there. But it didn't happen. So women were just as much the object of that death threat as the men were. And Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi also said, when Purim occurs on Shabbos, one asks questions and expounds on the subject of the day. We'll keep reading. And the Gemara raises a question with regard to this last halacha, this law. Why was it necessary to specify Purim? The same principle applies also to the festivals, as it is taught in Baraisa. Moses enacted for the Jewish people that they should ask questions about and expound upon the subject of the day, meaning they should occupy themselves with the laws of Passover on Passover, with the laws of Shavuos on Shavuos, and with the laws of Sukkot on Sukkot, right? So when we're having that holiday, it's good to learn about the laws of that holiday. In fact, we're supposed to start learning the laws of any holiday 30 days before that holiday, so we're ready when the holiday arrives. But on the holiday itself, that's the time to sort of do that final review of the laws of that holiday and make sure we're doing everything correctly. And the Gemara answers, so why, if that's the general rule that we study the laws of holidays on the holidays, and we read the Torah portions about the holidays on that day, so why was it necessary to say the same rule applies to Purim? And the Gemara answers, it was necessary for Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi to mention Purim, lest you say that when Purim falls on Shabbos, we should decree that it is prohibited to expound upon the halachas, on the laws of that day, due to the concern of Rabbah. What was Rabbah's concern? Rabbah said that the reason the Megillah is not read on a Purim that falls on Shabbos is due to a concern that one might carry the Megillah in the public domain. What is a Megillah? It's a scroll, right? So the Megillah, there are several books that can be called a Megillah. Lamentations is a Megillah. Ruth, the book of Ruth, is a Megillah. And also the book of Esther is a Megillah. But physically, it's a scroll wound around one dowel. A Sefer Torah, right, goes on two dowels, right, and we roll it from one dowel to the other. But a Megillah, scroll of Esther, is all, the parchment, one long parchment, but wound around on one single dowel. That's the scroll. The concern is if we were to do public readings of the Megillah on a Purim that falls out on Shabbos, that a person might come to carry that scroll through the public domain because he can't read it. He wants somebody to read it for him. And now he carries it from a private domain to a public domain, or more than 4 cubits in the public domain. And now he has violated Shabbos. That is Rabbah's concern. And that Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi therefore teaches us that expounding the halachas of the day is not prohibited as a preventive measure, lest one read the Megillah on Shabbos. And you can see why that would be. We don't read the Megillah on Shabbos because we're concerned that one may come to carry the scroll through the public domain. Saying that we also are not going to read and talk about the laws of Purim on Purim is one step further removed, because we might come to carry, because we might want to hear the Megillah, and because we might want to hear the Megillah, we might come to carry. So the sages don't issue a decree upon a decree, and so it is permitted and is obligated even to study the laws of Purim on Purim, even if it falls out on Shabbos. And Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi further said, with regard to Purim, a person is obligated to read the Megillah at night and then to repeat it, lishnotah, during the day. As it is stated, Psalm 22, verse 3, "Oh my God, I call by day, but you do not answer. And at night there is no surcease for me," which alludes to reading the Megillah both by day and by night. That is, in fact, the law. We read the Megillah on the night of Purim and then the next day during the day of Purim. And some of the students who heard this statement understood from it that one is obligated to read the Megillah at night and to study its relevant tractate of Mishna by day, right? The laws of Purim as spelled out in the Mishna. Maybe that's what we study the next day. And Rabbi Yirmiyah said to them, it was explained to me personally by Rabbi Chia bar Abba himself, that the term lishnotah here has a different connotation than review the laws from the Mishnah. For example, as people say, I will conclude this section and repeat it, i.e., I will review my studies. And similarly, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi's statement means that one must repeat the reading of the Megillah by day after reading it at night. Let me turn this off. Bam. At night. And the Gemara notes that this ruling was also stated by another Amora, another rabbi of the Talmud. As Rabbi Chelbo said, that Ula Bira'a said, a person is obligated to read the Megillah at night and then repeat it during the day, as it is stated, and he gives a different reason from Scripture, as it is stated, so that my glory may sing praise to you and not be silent. O Lord my God, I will give thanks to you forever. Psalm 30, verse 13. And the dual formulation of singing praise and not being silent alludes to reading the Megillah both by night and by day. New subject. Now we're at the bottom of the A side of page 4, and we're going to actually go over to the B side, skip a few lines, which is regarding advancing the Megillah reading for the villages to the 11th, 12th, and 13th of the month of Adar, because we're going to keep discussing this for a while, so we don't need the first 3 paragraphs of that. So come in here, that which was taught in the following Mishna, which we're going to come to tomorrow. Rabbi Yehuda said, when is the Megillah read? From the 11th of Adar and onward. And we remember that we saw that the people who live in villages, if Purim falls out on a Friday, for example, so the 14th is Friday, so it was permitted in ancient times for them to read the Megillah on the 13th of Adar, on Thursday, because that's the day of assembly, when the farmers would come into town for market day, and everybody was gathered there, and that was a better time for the Megillah to be read publicly. And now what we're going to be discussing is, well, who really benefits from that? Is it the farmers themselves, that they're in town and it's easier for them to hear it? Or is it the city folk who are receiving the benefit of having the food and drink brought to market so that they can have good food and drink on Purim? So come in here, that which was taught in the following Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda said, when is the Megillah read? Earlier, right? When do we advance it? In a place where the villagers generally enter town on Monday and Thursday, the market days, which are also the Torah reading days. However, in a place where they do not generally enter town on Monday and Thursday, one may read the Megillah only in its designated time, which is the 14th of Adar. And the Gemara infers, if it enters your mind to say that the ordinance is for the benefit of the cities, would it be reasonable to suggest that because the villagers do not enter town on Monday and Thursday, the residents of the cities should lose out and not be provided with food and water? Right? Is advancing the reading of the Megillah for the benefit of these cities as opposed to walled cities, which is even a day after that. But the cities versus the villages, right? Who's really benefiting? Is it the farmers coming into town or the cities who are receiving this food or water? If it's the city folk and you have a city where they don't have market days on Monday and Thursday, and they're saying, well, then you can't change the date, but then they would be screwed, right? So the Gemara accepts this argument. Do not say that the sages allow the villages to advance their reading of the Megillah to the day of assembly so that they can be free to provide food and water to their brethren in the cities of Purim. Rather, say that the sages were lenient with them because the villages supply water and food to their brethren in the cities. This ordinance was established for the benefit of the villagers, the ones who come into town, so that they should not have to make an extra trip to the cities to hear the reading of the Megillah. However, in a place where the villages do not go to the cities, so advancing their reading of the Megillah to the day of assembly will not benefit them, and therefore they must read it in its proper time on the 14th of Adar. We skip a couple of short lines which have to do with why are we talking about the day of the week versus a date in the calendar. And then we learn in the Mishnah, if the 14th of Adar occurs on Erev Shabbos, which is to say Friday, right? So Purim lands on Friday. So the villages advance their reading to the day of assembly, which is Thursday, and the large towns and the walled cities read it on Friday, in its time on the 14th of Adar. And the Gemara asks, whose opinion is expressed in this Mishnah? It cannot be either Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, known as Rebbe, or Rabbi Yosei. And the Gemara explains, what is the opinion of Rebbe? As it is taught in a Baraisa, if the 14th occurs on Erev Shabbos, villages and large towns advance their reading to the day of assembly, right? To the 13th, which is Thursday. And the walled cities read it on the day of Purim, which is Friday. Now, normally, the walled cities read it on the 15th of Adar, which is the day after Purim for everybody else. And read it on the day of Purim, which is Friday. Now, Rebbe disagrees, and he says, no, I say that the readings of the large towns should not be deferred from their usual date, the 14th of Adar. Rather, both these, the large towns, and those, the walled cities, read the Megillah on the day of Purim, which is the 14th. And the Gemara asks, what is the read? Now, why would they read it? Why would the walled cities read it on the 14th, which is a Friday? Because they can't read it on the 15th, which is Shabbos. And the Gemara asks, what is the reason of the first Tana? And the Gemara explains that it is as written to keep these 2 days according to their writing and according to their time in every year. That's Esther 9:27. So that indicates that Purim must be celebrated every year in similar fashion. Now, just as in every other year, the large towns precede the walled cities by 1 day, right? Normally, the large towns on the 14th and the walled cities on the 15th. So, since in every other year, the large towns come before the walled cities by 1 day, so too here, the large towns precede the walled cities by 1 day. Consequently, since the walled cities cannot read the Megillah on Shabbos, and they are required to advance the reading to Friday, the large towns must also advance their reading to Thursday. The Gemara objects. Say that the words in every year indicate that just as in every other year, the Megillah readings are in the large towns are not deferred from their usual date, and they read the Megillah on the 14th, so too, here, the Megillah readings in the large towns should not be deferred from their usual date, and they too should be read on the 14th. And the Gemara answers, well, here it is different, as it is not possible for the large towns to fulfill all the conditions at the same time, i.e., to read on the 14th and to read the day before the walled cities, since the walled cities can't read on Shabbos. And we've already said the walled cities can't delay. You can't read the Megillah on the 16th of Adar, the 17th. So the latest that the walled cities can read it is on the 15th. The 15th is Shabbos. So the walled cities definitely have to read on Friday. Are the large towns also going to read on Friday, or are they going to advance to Thursday, is what we're discussing. And the Gemara asks, and Rebbe, what is his reason? The Gemara explains that it is also based upon the words, in every year. Just as in every other year, the readings in the large towns are not deferred from their usual date, and they read on the 14th, so too, here, the readings in the large towns are not deferred from their usual date, but rather they read on the 14th. So the Gemara objects, say that the words in every year indicate that just as every year the large towns precede the walled cities by 1 day, and they read on the 14th, so too here the large towns precede the walled cities by 1 day, and so they should read on the 13th, on Thursday. And the Gemara answers, but here it is different. It is not possible to fulfill all of the conditions at the same time. You can't read on the 14th and be 1 day before the walled cities. Something has to give. So the Gemara asks, okay, well, what does Rabbi Yosef say? As it is taught in a Baraisa, if the 14th occurs on Erev Shabbos, on Friday, the walled cities and the villages advance their reading of the Megillah to the day of assembly, to Thursday. And the large towns read it on the day of Purim itself. So now they're saying, well, the walled cities, which normally go 1 day after the large towns, now they're going to go 1 day before. The walled cities are going to go along with the villages on Thursday, and the large towns are going to be on Friday. But now you have inverted the normal thing, which is normally the towns go before the walled cities. So is this going to work? Rabbi Yosef says the walled cities never precede the large towns. Rather, both these, the large towns, and those, the walled cities, read on that day, on Friday, the 14th. And the Gemara asks, what is the reason for the Tana of the Baraisa? As it is written in every year, Just as in every other year, the large towns read the Megillah on the 14th, and the time for this type of settlement to read the Megillah is not the time for that type of settlement to read the Megillah, as the large towns and the walled cities never read the Megillah on the same day. So too, here, the large towns read on the 14th, and the time for this type of settlement to read the Megillah is not the same as that type of settlement to read the Megillah. Therefore, since the walled cities are not going to go on the same day, and they can't go later than the 15th, we're going to move them up to Thursday, and they're going to go before the towns. That way they're on different days than the towns. Gemara objects. Say that the words in every year indicate that just as in every other year, the walled cities do not precede the large towns, so too, here, the walled cities do not precede the large towns. Gemara answers, but here it is different, as it is not possible to fulfill all the conditions at the same time. The large towns should read on the 14th. The large towns and the walled cities should read on different cities, and the walled cities should not precede the large towns. So what are we going to do? What is the reason of Rabbi Yosef? It is based upon the words in every year. So just as in every other year, the walled cities do not precede the large towns, so too here, the walled cities do not precede the large towns. So I think he's suggesting, so the walled cities and the large towns both go on the same day. Every other year, they don't go on the same day. This year, they do go on the same day. And the Gemara raises a difficulty. Say that the words in every year indicate that just as in every other year, the time for this type of settlement to read the Megillah is not the time for that type of settlement to read the Megillah. So too, here, the time for this type of settlement to read the Megillah is not the time for that type of settlement to read the Megillah. Therefore, since the large towns read on the 14th, the walled cities read on the 13th. And the Gemara answers, here it is different, as it is not possible to fulfill all the conditions at once. What is the law? The halacha. Times of reading. When the Megillah was read on several different days, if the 14th occurred on Shabbos, the residents of the unwalled cities advanced the reading of the Megillah to the eve of Shabbos, to Friday, and the walled cities read the Megillah on Sunday, which would be okay, because they are on the 15th. And the villagers advance their reading to the day of assembly, which is Thursday. But what is it that happens when the 14th is on Friday? Right? What is the law then? When the 15th of Adar occurs on Shabbos, those in the walled cities read the Megillah and distribute gifts to the poor on Friday. On Shabbos, they take out an additional Torah scroll and read the portion generally read on Purim. In addition to the regular weekly Torah portion, they also recite the blessing al Hanisim, on the miracles during the prayers of Shabbos. And the sending of gifts and the Purim feast is performed on Sunday. Such a Purim is called a three-part Purim, as residents of walled cities perform various aspects of the Purim celebration over the course of 3 days. Some say that the feast and the giving of gifts is done both on Shabbos and on Sunday. Okay. All right. They keep arguing about what to do with these three in that situation, and it kind of gets a little bit redundant. So I'm just skipping a couple paragraphs, and it says, in any case, it is apparent from the Mishna and the Baraisas that everyone agrees that one does not read the Megillah on Shabbos. That's what they all agree on. So what is the reason for this? And Rabbah said, everyone is obligated to participate in reading the Megillah on Purim and blowing the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. And not everyone is proficient in reading the Megillah or blowing the shofar. Therefore, the sages issued a rabbinic decree that the Megillah is not read on Shabbos, lest one take the Megillah in his hand and go to an expert to learn how to read it, or to hear the expert read it, and due to his preoccupation, he will carry it 4 cubits in the public domain and thereby desecrate Shabbos. And the Gemara comments, and this same concern for the sanctity of Shabbos is the reason that the sages decree that the shofar is not blown when Rosh Hashanah occurs on Shabbos. And this same concern is the reason that the sages decreed that one may not take the lulav on Shabbos during Sukkot. All right, I'm almost done. So if you got questions or comments, get them in. Rav Yosef said, there is another reason the Megillah is not read on Shabbos, because the eyes of the poor are raised to the reading of the Megillah. One of the practices of Purim is distributing gifts to the poor. The poor look forward to Purim. The poor await the day on which the Megillah is read, because on that day, gifts are distributed to the poor. If the Megillah is read on Shabbos, it will not be possible to distribute gifts to the poor, who will be deeply disappointed. And the Gemara notes that this is also taught in a Baraisa. Even though the sages said that the villages advance their reading of the Megillah to the day of assembly, they also collect the gifts for the poor on that day, and they distribute them to the poor on that day. So the Gemara is troubled by the wording of this Baraisa. Does the Baraisa read, even though the sages said? On the contrary, it is because they said that the villages advance their reading to the day of assembly, to Thursday, that the gifts must be collected and distributed to the poor on that very day. Rather, the Baraisa should read as follows. Since the sages said that the villages advance their reading of the Megillah to the day of assembly, they collect the gifts for the poor on that day and they distribute them on that day, because the eyes of the poor are raised to the reading of the Megillah, and they should not be disappointed. However, the rejoicing that takes place on Purim is practiced only in its designated time, the 14th of Adar. So we might bring the reading of the Megillah up, since we can't read it on Shabbos if Purim fell out on Shabbos, and we might distribute gifts to the poor on that earlier day when we're reading the Megillah. Nevertheless, even when Purim lands on Shabbos, we rejoice in Purim and the various practices that are associated with rejoicing on the day that we do on Shabbos, as long as it doesn't in some way conflict with Shabbos. That's our daf. Looks like we got through another class without glitching. I think the new system is solid. Thank you, God. All right, do we have questions or comments? Christo, so it's a good idea that my congregation keeps a Megillah Esther in our synagogue, I take it, even though we still don't read it on Shabbos. That's a good question. I guess you're referring to the idea that we study the laws of Purim on Purim. And so we could study, that Megillah. But no, I don't think so. I saw a note. The Megillah on Shabbos. The scroll of Esther is never read on Shabbos, right? So you might think that just means we don't do the public reading of the Megillah on Shabbos, due to the decree of Rabbah. Some say that it is forbidden even to move a Megillah on Shabbos, as it is considered muktzah, set aside, because it is not allowed to be read, while some permit it. Right, so you'd have to ask your rabbi which camp you guys land in. So we will study the laws of Purim of a Purim that lands on Shabbos, but maybe not by reading a scroll of Esther. We have other books that have the book of Esther contained in them, as well as other matters that we could have prepared. But yes, we do not carry the scroll, and it is good that we have texts already in Shul, so that we wouldn't have to come to carry them through the public domain. Kurt, I would like to thank everyone who said Mishaberak for my grandson last year. Tomorrow is the first anniversary of his heart surgery, and he is doing great. Baruch Hashem. I'm so glad to hear this news. Sometimes we pray for people and we don't hear what happened. Thank you so much for letting us know what happened. I'm thrilled to hear that your grandson is doing great. And may he live to 120 and grow up to a life of Torah, chuppah, and masim tovim. A life of Torah study, a Jewish wedding, and a life of good deeds. And we say amen. Kurt, why the difference between the large towns and the walled cities? Because in the book of Esther, right, we learn that, like the the decree went out through the kingdom. First, Haman's decree went out that on that particular day, which fell out by lot, and that's why it's called Purim, all of the Jews were going to be killed. And then later, after Haman was executed, new decrees went out, written by Mordecai and Esther, that the Jews throughout the kingdom can defend themselves. I like this law, right? It's not just you shall not kill the Jews. It's you shall not kill the Jews, and if you try to kill the Jews can fight back and will, and they should be armed and ready for that. And so, a terror of the Jews fell over the kingdom. The few people that rose up and tried to kill Jews, they got vanquished. So it was a big reversal of fortune, as it were. And the enemies of the Jews in the capital city of Shushan, there were more enemies of the Jews in that city, and the battle against them lasted for an extra day. And so that's why in Shushan, Purim, the completion of Purim took one extra day. And so that's why they read the scroll of Esther and celebrate Purim one day late in cities that are comparable to Shushan, so by which the sages have derived that means ancient cities that already were walled cities at the time of Joshua. Ifa. Esther was not caring for babies. Women are exempt because the needs of babies, children, and others for whom women care take precedence over positive time-bound mitzvahs. Just so. Paula, have an idea. What is it? Have an idea. What if randomly 18 names were put in a unique chosen container, box, horn, hat, and out of those, Nina, for example, pulled out a previously decided number, your choice, and from those, they would have one question answer opportunity with you both. Just another of my thoughts. Are you talking about, like, you mean not just written questions like this, but that somebody could come on video? I don't know. Maybe once we have the app, we'll have that capability, sort of like a Zoom style, bring somebody in on video. I'm not sure. We have to think about that. Could be good, could not. But I like having. But if you want to, send in questions in advance to make sure that they get covered, since we don't get to every question that appears in the comments. Send us a direct message. We could talk about it more. Sharon. Is Tainus Esther, the fast of Esther, moved for Shushan Purim, as it is for Purim when it falls on Shabbos? It is moved to Thursday when Purim falls out on Shabbos. What happens when Shushan Purim is on Shabbos? Right, that's what I was asking before. If the 15th of Adar falls on Shabbos, right? So the people in the walled cities, they can't celebrate Purim as they normally would because the 15th now is on Shabbos. So they can't move it back, so they have to move it up. So this is the problem, right? So now you would have the walled cities celebrating Purim on the 14th, and the towns are, and then the rest of the world, because we don't do this idea anymore of bringing it up to the 13th, 12th, or 11th with the villages. So now the rest of the world is on the 14th, which is Friday. So the question is, if the people in the walled cities, now it gets moved up to Friday, are we also going to move everyone else up to Thursday so that Shushan Purim and regular Purim don't fall on the same day? I'm not sure. Did we? I don't know that we finally got a ruling on that or not. I didn't actually see a little halacha on that. So I don't know that we've determined that answer yet. I would have to Google it. I'm sure there is a clear answer. I'm just not sure offhand. I'm just not sure offhand. But I think we're going to get to it because we haven't finished the discussion in the Gemara yet. So I think we're going to get to that question. All right, my friends, that's what I've got for us today. With God's help, tomorrow's Erev Shabbos. So our normal Friday time is noon Pacific on Fridays. And with God's help, we'll be together then. Have a great evening.